Hi, welcome to SIPS Switzerland webinar, Zooming to Better Online Events. SIPS Switzerland is a branch of the Chartered Institute for Procurement and Supply, and today's event is about how to deliver your precious material better online in webinars and meetings. We've seen a lot of great material over the last 9 months of lockdown, some of it a little bit let down by the delivery, and we've been at fault ourselves on several occasions. I'm going to deliver part one, which is called Lights, Camera, Action, and it covers the preparation for an event and a little bit about the basic technology. And then we're delighted that Christopher Barrett will take us through part two, Impact in a New Era. And this is going to cover a little bit about style and personal branding and getting your message through this difficult online medium to a remote audience. So let me kick off part one, Lights, Camera, Action. We'll start with video. The first thing to do is to meet your audience at eye level to develop trust and confidence and empathy. That usually means a monitor mounted camera at least a meter away from your eyes. So something like this. The camera should be over there. If you get that, then what you get is a view which is direct. It's as if you're having a normal conversation. But if you're thinking, I don't like the background, you've spotted something. It's cluttered and unprofessional. And I want to mention background in just a minute. But I think that view is still a lot better than nose cam. Nobody wants to look up your nostrils, and nobody wants to have the ceiling light in the background. Background lighting is difficult. You should really be lit from the front against white, possibly with light reflected off a white wall in front of you, but certainly not with lighting behind, which darkens your face. A lot of people are tempted by a virtual background. Now, virtual backgrounds are fine, but it is tempting to be carried away. I'll bet you're already starting to look at my reading material and on the wall behind me, and that can be as distracting as having the empty room or the background lighting. So be careful of that. And if you are using a virtual image, a virtual background, then be very careful of the technology. As far as I know, only Zoom actually offers you the opportunity to put up a green screen. And here you can see the control panel for Zoom, and it says I have a green screen in the bottom left-hand corner, and you tick the box to make it blue, and you have to show the color of the screen. If you don't have a chroma key physical screen behind you, I advise you not to use a virtual background. And that brings us on to the next topic, which is audio. I don't mind headphones. I don't mind them on me, and I don't mind them on other people. Christopher and I disagree slightly on this. Christopher prefers to have a microphone. In my experience, a fairly cheap headset, which is wired, gives less problems than anything else that you can think of. Even the best microphone is only as good as the acoustics in the room, and it can be an awful lot more expensive than a cheap wired headphone. Let's look at software. The four big players are Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, and Microsoft Teams, of course. These are great, but there's hundreds of others. The thing to do is to make sure that whatever you're using, you familiarize yourself with it intimately. Understand how it works, what it can do. Don't try and use any fancy technology that you haven't already tested offline. Nearly all of these, I'm not sure about WebEx, nearly all have a free version that you can download yourself, use privately without any cost. And you can check out most of the functionality on these from the privacy of your own office. So try that. And when you're actually in a meeting, delegate somebody to manage the meeting for you, to manage this technology. For instance, if you're in a webinar, bring people online to speak, to manage the chat lines, and if people have difficulty joining, to help them out. You don't want to be distracted when you're delivering a presentation by having to manage the chat lines and having to deal with individual audience issues. A word about internet and Wi-Fi. It is not good practice to vanish at your own meeting, at your own party, as Gandalf told Bilbo sternly. It's not good practice to wow and flutter and burble and gargle online. So make sure that your internet connection is strong and stable, and that your Wi-Fi doesn't let it down. If your Wi-Fi is at the other end of your house and it has to go through several brick walls and there are televisions in between, it's probably going to be the weakest part of your system. Rehearsal. Rehearse twice. The first time is to check out the technology and the process, and do this with the full panel or speakers, whoever is there. They don't have to actually present at the first meeting, but they need to understand what the format will be and feel confident about what's going to happen and how it's going to happen, and to feel confident that you know what's going to happen. The second meeting is a dress rehearsal, and they should ideally go through their whole presentation so that you can time it and identify the questions. At the very least, they should deliver a summary of it, and then the panel or the team should get into discussion to simulate how it's going to be online. That way, when you launch the event and they join in the discussion, they will hit the ground running. They will already be interacting amongst themselves and have all those things ready. The next question is the launch. Sorry for skipping ahead of myself. When you launch the meeting, do so on time, but get the panel in quarter of an hour beforehand. That way, if there are any issues on the day, if people have missed the rehearsal, they get a chance to settle down, get steady and ready for the opening of the meeting. And I like to let the audience in advance of the launch time. I don't see anything wrong with people joining 5 or 10 minutes beforehand, and they can, if you like, see the panel members walking onto the stage, metaphorically, and they get to feel comfortable about who's there and what's going to happen, and you can chat to the audience as they assemble and welcome them in and have a light conversation possibly about where they're from, or the news, or little snippets about the event that you're about to host. And then you can look up on time and say, right, here we go, dead on time. Please don't be late. So let's look now at the format of meetings. The classical format is the meeting with an awful lot of people in it, and it can be an absolute disaster. So if you're holding a standard, usually internal meeting, try and break it up as much as you can. Only have a few people on the screen at any one time. You don't want a disaster with 20 or 30 people and you can't follow them, and it just begins to look a mess. But meetings are the easy bit. The reason most people are holding events is to have a webinar, and that is the expensive part of all of the systems. A meeting facility costs $10 or $15 a month. A webinar facility starts at around $50 and can cost you $300 or $1,000 a month. It's the webinar that makes companies the money. And the classic webinar event might have 3 speakers and a chair. And this is inherited from what we might call the village hall events that we're all familiar with in the physical world before lockdown. They're great, they work, it's a proven formula, but even in the physical world, they get a bit boring. So what else can you do? Well, a panel is a great idea. In a panel you can have 5 panelists and a chair. Of course, 5 panelists are not going to speak for 10 or 20 minutes, so they have a quick introduction for about 3 minutes, maximum 5, and they talk about their relationship to the subject, and then you're straight into a set of questions. A panel event is a good follow-up to a village hall event. And I should have said earlier, when talking about the village hall event, in the old physical world, we would put up with people talking for 15, 20, 25 minutes. It got a bit agonizing, but it happened. Don't go there with an online meeting. 10 minutes maximum. Have to be able to put the whole thing over in 10 minutes, including any questions. Anything longer is just too long. So the panel and chairperson is a good example. Another example of a webinar is a debate. And in the debate you can have a proposer and an opposer and a motion. And you can follow the Oxford Union style on this. An Oxford Union style debate for procurement could be: this House proposes that Christmas should be delayed until the 25th of January so that everyone can buy their Christmas presents in the sales. Or something. And in this you would have a vote before the event, at the start of the meeting, before the speakers. You then have the proposer, opposer, 2 seconders, and then you can bring in the audience, and they can speak remotely for or against the speaker. Normally the proposers and opposers will plant people in the audience beforehand, and then you have a vote at the end, and the difference between the starting vote and the finishing vote determines which is the winner. Really great format. I confess I haven't done it online. I've done it physically with our SIPS events in Switzerland, and it works. It's really nice. Another thing you can do, and we did this several weeks ago, is a hybrid webinar, and here you use a studio. And in the studio you have a chair and you have a number of panelists, and these are live in the studio, and they're together. They're socially distanced, of course, but they're speaking, they're doing their bit, and the chairperson is introducing it and finishing it, and the whole thing has an extremely professional look to it, a bit like the commentators after a football match or a news studio. You've seen lots of it on television. And then you can bring in remote panelists, if you like, from the ones who can't travel to the studio. A studio is likely to cost you about $5,000 maybe. That's quite a lot, but I'll bet most of you are associated with companies who have studios. If they didn't have them last year, I'll bet they have them this year. So that was the format. And during a webinar event, you probably want to do polling. Polls are fantastic. They are a good way of moving from one topic to another, of involving the audience and getting debate excited. The one thing to note is a poll should never last more than 1 minute. From the point when you read out the question to the point when you present the results to the panel and the audience, ideally between 30 or 45 seconds. I know the audience results, the audience is still voting, and it's still ticking up, and it's very tempting to say, oh, we'll just give it a little bit longer. Don't. Keep the pace moving forwards. So, essentially, that's it. That's the first part of this webinar from SIPS Switzerland. It was called Lights, Camera, Action. And the second part from Christopher Barrett is Impact in a New Era. Christopher's email address is on the screen on my right, christopher@greystone.co.uk, and there's a reminder underneath that you can get in touch with the SIPS Switzerland branch by through its LinkedIn networking site, and you can be on our mailing list of events by contacting us through Forum online newsletter and receive our event news. And that's it from me. Thank you for listening, and please enjoy Christopher Barrett's presentation on Impact in a New Era.